I know I want to start with St. John's because they deserve it. Slow start for sure. Second half, blistered Omaha. And as they scored 50 points in the second half to Omaha's 25, I was just watching some of the highlights. I did not stay up and watch the second half of this game. And as my buddy Mikey K has often told me this season, bet the Johnnies in the second half because they usually start out slow and then the second half they just absolutely just devour who they're playing against. And certainly, this was the case last night. In this game, we might as well forget about it because now we have a matchup of Pitino and John Calipari. That is St. John's and Arkansas, because Arkansas was one of the upset winners yesterday. And by my count, we had 4 upset winners yesterday.
10-7's not really an upset, but I know what you're saying.
It's an upset. And, obviously Drake beating Missouri is an upset. McNeese State, obviously, most people thought McNeese State would win. They beat Clemson. Clemson scored, 13 points in the first half?
13 points in the first.
They were horrendous.
20 minutes of basketball, a power conference team scored 13 points in the half.
That had to be it may be one of the worst first half performances in the history of the NCAA tournament. I'm not sure if it is or not, but that had to be.
Did you see their first half three-point shooting?
Oh, it was brutal.
1 for 15.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Let's keep hoisting them up, guys.
So, again,
Terrible.
forget about defense. If the other team can't hit their shots, it doesn't really matter. Of course, you had Creighton, who actually had a very impressive performance against Louisville. That's a 9 over an 8. And then, like we said, Arkansas over Kansas last night. And, interesting, John Calipari and Rick Pitino matching up on Saturday it's just amazing.
Sets up for a fun day. There's no question about it. And the one thing, I know there's not much to discuss with the Omaha game, but what I would say is last night for me was a little bit of a microcosm of what St. John's has been all season. I got to do that game up at Storrs when they played UConn that Friday night in February, and I was blown away by the way they share the ball. And I know it's Omaha, and I told you yesterday I expected them to blow them out as they did. But even last night, their ball movement, we talk about their defense at nauseum, and rightly so, and we will continue to do that, I'm sure. But the way they share the game, always making the extra pass, always trying to find the open guy. R.J. Lewis is hitting threes, and if you look at them, it looked like teams that play the Knicks. All of them are wide open because they make the extra pass, and he finds himself in space, and it's impressive.
It's the underrated part of the St. John's team. The most talked about parts of the St. John's team are their free throws and their three-point attempts.
In terms of what could get them in this tournament, yes.
Right, exactly. That's the one negative thing about them. You play Omaha, you should beat Omaha, you should just absolutely steamroll them. That's what they did in the second half, and that's what you could easily expect. And just watching some of those highlights, those kids were overwhelmed.
For sure.
So the underrated part of what Rick Pitino does is the way that his offense does flow and the way that those kids have bought into it. And, even when you watch them go through the Big East tournament, how many times did they have somebody open under the basket that they found?
Yep.
And it was an easy dunk or lay-in or there was a putback in some way, shape, or form because they do crash the offensive boards and the defensive boards. So, hey, look, this was expected. They were a little jittery at the beginning. And that was to be expected as well.
Yeah, Pitino said a little tight to get started for these guys.
But now they're in. Now they're in, and now they're up and running. And it's going to be 24 hours. It's going to be Pitino, Calipari. And they're going to be talking so wonderfully about each other over the next, all day today. It's going to be this is the greatest thing. These two great coaches, these two great friends, going to get, after each other. This is going to be a great game, and hopefully it will be. But I would say that you have two coaches that know each other about as well as anybody can know an opposing coach. So that's a plus and it's a minus. But at the end of the day, it's going to be intense.
It should be fun. And the questions came rapidly after that game last night, which you kind of expected. And part of that, too, was Pitino on, what's today, Friday? So I guess this was on Wednesday when he did his press conference, kind of getting ready for this game in the tournament. Someone had asked him, who his biggest rival was, and he went into this whole thing about Jim Calhoun and how
they hated each other.
Yeah, respected
back in the day
one
when
another.
they first started.
Yeah, when they were at small schools, Northeastern or whatever it was, and how they really disliked each other. So then last night, the conversation very quickly, as you would expect, turned into, you talked about Calhoun, what about Calipari? And it is fun, it's interesting because when you think of Calipari for such a long time, you think Kentucky. When you think of Pitino, obviously, lately he's been all over the place after Louisville, which we know out of the country in different spots. I own him before he comes here. But you're talking about two titans in the game. And it shapes up to be a lot of fun. And it's in Providence where Patino was the coach.
Oh, it's crazy. It's got everything.
So many storylines. Like if you're a writer that's covering this, you can just cherry pick what type of story you want to write because it's all very interesting and fun.
And by the way, that should be one hell of a crowd at that game.
I would think so.
This is like the epitome of what college basketball is all about. These two maniac head coaches going after each other. These kids playing 40 minutes of fury, as you know, and they're going to be in each other's face, and it's going to be hopefully it's going to live up to the billing. That's what you want. I want a buzzer beater at the end. I want overtime. I want it all.
So that brings up another point about the St. John's team because while we talk a lot about their 4 losses by only 7 points, they've also won a lot of close games this year.
Yeah.
And you talk about being battle tested. I would expect that this game will be much closer than 30 points. But if you're a St. John's fan, you got to feel really good that they're going to figure out a way to get it done in the end because, again, you look through they've had a lot of blowout wins, of course, but they've had some games that, man, overtime games where they make the big plays in the big spot, talking about big shots at the end of, not fourth quarter, second halves. It's almost as if they're ready for the moment. They kind of shook off the tournament nerves yesterday, and away we go.
How about the fact that you have Kansas, Louisville, Clemson, and Missouri all losing?
Yeah.
I mean, Louisville and Kansas, those are, basketball hotbeds.
I didn't realize this until I heard it yesterday. Kansas was the preseason #1.
Yeah. Bill Self is an amazing coach. I mean, and they have one of the great programs in the history of college basketball, as you know. It's like right up there with Duke and North Carolina and UCLA. There are the preeminent teams when it comes to college basketball, and Kansas has always been one of those teams, and Bill Self has been a great coach.
But there's no way they're happy there now.
No.
Preseason #1, they were unranked at the end.
Yeah, I don't know
exactly
how their whole season, I don't know if they had injuries or what. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know anything about that, but I will tell you that there's history there. I've interviewed Bill Self a couple times. He's a really, he's your typical hardcore NCAA basketball coach.
Mm-hmm.
And that is hey, look, they came in as a 7. That wasn't that high of a seed, and the fact that they lost is not shocking. The interesting thing to me really is McNeese State, where a lot of people actually had them winning yesterday.
Yeah.
And this was the one 12-5 situation where people thought this would be a chance for a total upset, and they got it. And now McNeese State goes against Purdue, who won their game, and Purdue's a pretty good team.
Purdue's really good, and I didn't think they played great yesterday, but they still came away with a win. Purdue, top to bottom, is as good as I've seen all season long, and as we talked about yesterday, those kids have been there collectively together for the last 3 years, so it's about as cohesive a unit as you're going to see. But yeah, you hit on it. Drake winning, McNeese winning. Those were 2 teams that the experts loved as as upsets. The other one, which they didn't win, was Yale. They thought Yale would have a good chance to win yesterday.
Because they're the good three-point shooting team.
Yeah, and they've pulled off some wins in the tournament.
Yes.
James Jones a good coach, but Texas A&M was better. But yeah, people nailed the other 2, and so yeah, it's interesting. It was a fun day. It wasn't I wouldn't call it one of the best days because I know there's a couple of upsets, but for the most part, it kind of went as planned.
It was a little chalky.
It was a little chalky.
Yeah.
And I do think the fact, so I'll give the NCAA tournament scheduling credit for one thing and a little discredit for the other. Number one, the fact that the St. John's first 2 games are in Providence is kind of cool because if you're a St. John's fan, it's a 3-hour drive up 95. And now if you went last night, great, you can stay and you get this big matchup with Arkansas tomorrow at 2:40, which is kind of fun. All good. The problem is if St. John's has captured the New York fan right now, putting that game on last night at 10 o'clock, and we talked about it, that was kind of disappointing. And that to me is where it's kind of, I felt like you were kind of waiting for St. John's. By the time you get there, all these games have been played. And it was late.
I think they play Saturday now at 2:30.
2:40. Yep.
2:40, which is right in the middle of me, Marash, Rascona, and a few other of my friends guest
Well,
bartending at the tap room in Huntington.
That place is going to be just
Let's go, baby.
It's going to be
St. John's.
awesome.
But I will say this. So I talked to a couple of buddies of mine who, you talk about St. John's going to Providence. Maryland has to go to Climate Change Arena in Seattle.
Understood.
So I got a couple friends who actually went out there. and they're going to go out there and support the coach and everything else.
Let me ask you this, because I was going to bring this up later, but since you just brought up Maryland, did you see Kevin Willard yesterday?
Oh, God, yes. I was going to get to that. But I asked my buddy, I said, is it just me or do we always get put in the West for some reason? University of Maryland, the University of Maryland. Yeah, we tend to always end up going out West for some stupid reason. And each school, I guess he told me this, and I'm assuming this is true because he goes to every Maryland basketball game. Each school gets 350 tickets to these games.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? I mean, you tell me St. John's got 350 tickets for this game up in Providence?
Makes sense. Why not?
Who else is going?
People that in Providence want to go to the NCAA tournament, they'll buy the ticket package. But a lot of these games, we talked about this the other day, a lot of these first and second round games are not well attended.
Yeah, but if you're a St. John's fan and this is like a historical team and they have a legitimate chance, you would think that you'd want to keep them in the East, which they did, which is smart. And I guess being the 2 seed, secures that kind of proximity to where your school is. But I mean, so the University of Maryland always gets sent out to the West bracket, and I mean, it's ridiculous. But Kevin Willard, the head coach of the University of Maryland, there's been a lot of smoke around him. And a lot of smoke around, does Villanova want him? Does this big school want him? And, Maryland's a big school, and it's known for its basketball. It used to be known for its football. The football's good. It's in the Big Ten, but they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. They can't beat Wisconsin. Can't beat Penn State. I mean, it's like Rutgers.
It's hard, yeah.
They do beat Rutgers. I think they've probably beaten them 5 out of the last 6 times or something like that. But Rutgers and Maryland are very similar to each other. Maryland has a huge basketball facility. After Gary Williams won the national championship, they built the big Xfinity Center down there. I don't know if it's still even called that.
It is, I believe.
It's like 19,000 people. It's enormous.
Beautiful
it's on
arena.
campus.
Yep.
Yeah, but they had Cole Fieldhouse, which they turned into an indoor facility for the football team, which is beautiful. And they have great they have great facilities. It's an amazing place. So Kevin Willard yesterday was asked about all these reports about where his name is linked to all these different schools, including Villanova. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking to the people that support the basketball program. They don't believe that Kevin's going to be leaving. But in typical Maryland fashion, here's the head coach not talking about the game they're getting ready to play. They're talking about whether or not he's going to be signing a contract with, it seems like, an athletic director that's leaving to go to SMU.
Like in fairness, he was asked the direct question.
Well, because everything's out there on social media, so he has to be asked that question.
Exactly right. And so when the question posed to him was, do you have to have a conversation with your team about all the rumors that are swirling about your future?
It's the same thing like the McNeese head coach.
And he is going, I guess, to NC State. Right. Yeah. So we talked about that, but to me, it was more to the state of college basketball, maybe college football too, but right now we're in the college basketball world. And it blew me away that and I guess it's out there, but the fact that he said he's having trouble signing the new contract because his agent is dealing with an AD he doesn't know who on his way to SMU, so who am I really dealing with?
Right.
Then he's talking about how the program has no money. They're bad with NIL.
Well, they just got $10 million, but that $10 million that they received about 3 weeks ago, they had a big press conference, and he was talking about this $10 million. I think the $10 million doesn't come until the guy who donated the $10 million dies. It's like a death gift.
Got it.
So, like I always say, you want to be worth more
alive than dead.
And some crazy Maryland basketball fan finds out who gave that death gift.
Be careful.
Who knows? You never know.
Be careful.
But I will, well, the school has always had trouble. It's got a huge alumni base. If not, it could be one of the biggest, if not the biggest alumni base in college, in college in general. There's not a lot of money that is donated back to that school. And I remember I was part of that, like 0.1% that actually did give money back to the school. But it is far and few between now. And we do have a lot of very famous and very wealthy alum from the school that just are not involved in athletics. And this is why Rutgers and Maryland are going to be stuck in mediocrity. And every now and again, they'll get to a point here. And I know what Kevin Willard's doing. He's playing the game, and I guess I would be doing the same thing. He's playing the game publicly it's somewhat embarrassing to the University of Maryland. He talked about how he wanted to spend Christmas in New York with his team, And all of a sudden, he was told he couldn't do it because it was too expensive.
Yeah, and I was getting to that. Yeah,
And let me just tell you, when a head coach starts talking like that, that means he's either putting pressure on the Board of Regents or on the school itself or on other people outside of the program, especially when it comes to now, they're going to have to share money that they are receiving with their players.
yeah. The whole thing is bizarre, and the word you just used is perfect. And I don't remember, and that's publicly, I don't remember so many different guys talking about the future, their players. The portal opens on Monday. Like it's a mess. We love the games, and people are going to watch this weekend. The bars are going to be full. The brackets, people do that. We're gambling and betting and all that stuff. I'm not saying there's not interest, but it's a mess.
Yeah, think about the McNeese State situation. You know, that coach has basically said, hey, guys, I'm going to NC State, but I'm going to stay here with you guys in the championship. And by the way, make sure you go into the transfer portal so I can bring you with me to NC State. So everybody's all happy in that situation. Maybe that's what's going on there. I don't know how many guys he'll lose due to graduation and, their careers coming to an end. But, for the University of Maryland, it's I don't want to say it's embarrassing, but
it was eye-opening.
Yeah, but like those of us who know the school we understand what's going on down there. There's not a lot of political will to be a great school when it comes to sports. They want to be, and they have raised the standards when it comes to the educational part. And my degree is worth so much more today than it was when I got it, because it is impossible to get into that school, and they have raised the level of academic requirements to get in there. There's no question about that. And anybody in this area who has tried to get into Maryland knows exactly what I'm talking about.
The thing that stinks as we go to break, the thing that stinks, and this is what Rutgers is dealing with too, is that it felt like college basketball, again, just stick with that, kind of leveled itself out, whereas if you just recruited well and coached well, you could win and compete with anybody. Now it's back to if you fundraise the best, you will be the best.
Yeah, the coach has got to be a fundraiser. The AD's got to be a fundraiser.
They all do.
It's just it's a really tough spot. And, right now, Kevin Willard's agent's out there talking to different schools that will probably come up with a package that's much better than Maryland's. But I also know that they do have a legitimate deal in front of him. I think he's questioning whether or not the school is all in. I mean, that he wants the school to be all in. And right now he's sitting there in a catbird seat. If they got to win, though, if they win, the more power and the more leverage he'll have.